video we will discuss empirical formula. Chemical formula are of two types, that is empirical formula as well as molecular formula. First of all, we will study empirical formula. Let's see what is the definition of empirical formula. The chemical formula that gives the simplest whole number ratio of atoms of each element present in a compound is called empirical formula. That is, the chemical formula that gives the simplest whole number ratio of atoms of each element present in a compound is called empirical formula. We will understand empirical formula with the help of some examples. We will see the example of, for example, if we have hydrogen peroxide, the simplest whole number ratio between the hydrogen and oxygen atoms in hydrogen peroxide is 1:1. So that's why the empirical formula for hydrogen peroxide, its empirical formula is HO. In this compound, hydrogen and oxygen, they are present in the ratio of 1:1. That's why the empirical formula for hydrogen peroxide is written as HO. Let's see some more examples. If we have molecule like glucose, we will see what is the empirical formula for glucose. Glucose C6H12O6. Now we will see what is the simplest whole number ratio between carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. The simplest whole number ratio between carbon, hydrogen and oxygen is 6:6, 6:12, 6:6. So the simplest whole number ratio between carbon, hydrogen and oxygen in glucose is 1:2:1. So the empirical formula for glucose is empirical formula of glucose. Glucose is CH2O. This is the empirical formula for glucose. We will see one more example to understand empirical formula. We have molecule benzene C6H6. We will see simple whole number ratio between carbon and hydrogen. In benzene, the simplest whole number ratio is 1:1. That is 6:6, 6:6. So the simplest whole number ratio between carbon and hydrogen is 1:1. That's why the empirical formula for benzene is empirical formula of benzene. Its empirical formula is CH. In this video, we will discuss molecular formula. We must know what is molecular formula. The chemical formula which give the actual whole number ratio of atoms of each element present in a molecule of that compound is called molecular formula. Once again, we will see the definition, that is the chemical formula which give the actual whole number ratio of atoms of each element present in a molecule of that compound is called molecular formula. We will understand molecular formula with the help of some examples. For example, in a compound hydrogen peroxide. In a compound hydrogen peroxide, actually 2 hydrogen atoms and 2 oxygen atoms are present in a molecule of hydrogen peroxide. So the actual ratio of hydrogen to oxygen atoms in a molecule of hydrogen peroxide is 2:2. That's why the molecular formula for hydrogen peroxide is H2O2. This is the molecular formula for hydrogen peroxide. Similarly, we'll take one more example. The actual ratio between carbon, hydrogen and oxygen atoms in glucose. In glucose, The actual ratio between carbon, hydrogen and oxygen atoms is 6 ratio 12 ratio 6. So the molecular formula of glucose will be C6H12O6. This is the molecular formula for glucose. Similarly, if we take another example, if we have a molecule of benzene, in a molecule of benzene, the actual ratio between carbon and hydrogen is, the ratio between carbon and hydrogen is 6 ratio 6. That's why the molecular formula for benzene is C6H6. C6H6 is the molecular formula. C6H6 is the molecular formula for benzene. Students, here we use a formula to find out the molecular formula. The formula which is used to calculate molecular formula is molecular formula is equal to empirical formula multiply by n. Empirical formula multiply by n, where n is a number. N is equal to 1, 2, 3 and so on. For example, molecular formula of benzene is C6H6. Molecular formula of benzene is C6H6 and its empirical formula is, empirical formula for benzene is equal to CH. Molecular formula of benzene is derived from its empirical formula. That is, how can we calculate molecular formula of benzene? We know very well what is the formula. Molecular formula is equal to empirical formula multiplied by n. The empirical formula for benzene is CH. The value of n is 6. So the molecular formula of benzene becomes C6H6. So in this way, by using the formula, we can find out molecular formula from empirical formula. I hope this is clear. To understand the concept of empirical formula, we will solve some questions. Let's see what first question is given. Write the empirical formula for the compound containing carbon to hydrogen in the following ratios. Here some ratios are given between carbon and hydrogen and we are asked to find the empirical formula. Let's start solving the question. The first ratio which is given between carbon and hydrogen is 1:4. So we'll solve this. We'll write carbon ratio hydrogen. What ratio is given? 1:4. It cannot be further simplified. So that's why this is the simplest whole number ratio between carbon and hydrogen, that is 1:4. So the empirical formula for this compound would be CH4, in which the ratio between carbon and hydrogen is 1:4. I hope this is clear. Now we will see the next question. In the next question, again a ratio is given to us, that is 2:6 between carbon and hydrogen, and we are asked to find its empirical formula. So how can we write its empirical formula? We write carbon ratio hydrogen. What ratio is given here? 2:6. Further we simplify this ratio and find the empirical formula. We know 2 1 the 2, 2 1 the 2, 2 2 the 2 3 the 6. So this is the simplest whole number ratio between carbon and hydrogen in this compound. So the empirical formula for this compound would be CH3, in which there is a ratio between carbon and hydrogen is 1:3. This is the simplest whole number ratio. So the empirical formula for this compound is CH3. I hope this is clear. Now we will solve the next question. Again, a question is given in which we are asked to find the empirical formula of a compound containing carbon to hydrogen in the ratio of 2:2. So we write carbon, hydrogen, and then we will find the empirical formula. We have carbon ratio hydrogen. What ratio is given? 2:2. Further simplified, 2 1 the 2, 2 1 the 2. So the simplest whole number ratio between carbon and hydrogen is 1:1. So the empirical formula for this compound is CH. In this empirical formula, the ratio between carbon and hydrogen is 1:1. I hope this is clear. Now we will see the next question which is given. Again, we are given 6:6 between carbon to hydrogen, and we are asked to find the empirical formula. So we'll solve this question. We will write carbon ratio hydrogen. What ratio is given here? 6:6. We simplify this ratio. 6 1 the 6, 6 1 the 6. So what is the simplest whole number ratio? 1:1. So that's why the empirical formula for this compound is CH. What is the empirical formula for this compound? The empirical formula for this compound is CH, in which carbon and hydrogen, they are present in the ratio of 1:1. I hope these questions are clear to you.